I'm Idiotech, and today I want to talk about some of the problems with the Division beta. Now, I'm not going to critically review this game right now because honestly there just isn't enough here for me to judge this game properly. We don't have access to skill trees, perks, a bunch of the base management stuff. We only got one mission out of the entire campaign. The side missions don't have much story involved in them. I really can't judge this game as a final product. The beta is essentially a demo. What I can do, however, is talk about some of the problems I've experienced and some of the issues the community has raised, and that's what I'm going to do in this video. It is designed to be developer feedback as well as to inform you about some of the problems that may exist upon release. The first thing is the game has a number of known bugs and unknown bugs. One of the known bugs is that when you first load up the game, you will be unable to shoot or change weapon. I found this kind of ironic and hilarious given the fact that it's a game primarily focused on shooting people. However, they have reported that they know about this bug and that it will be fixed for release, so that's good. But there are a number of other bugs. I get stuck in geometry a lot and get killed by AI as a result, not being able to dodge out of the way of grenades, etc, etc. The game feels overall quite unpolished, it feels unfinished. It's hard to describe. Some of the movement's just not right at times. Sometimes you try and jump over something and you run around it. There's some polish that needs to be done there, and overall the game is kind of full of bugs, both visual and technical. The game also has a number of performance issues. Now, when I first loaded up the game, I used the recommended settings. It pretty much maxed me out based on my hardware, and I was not able to maintain 60 FPS at 1080p. I am running a GTX 980, I have an i7 4790K, and 16GB of RAM. However, I did some reading and some research, and it turns out if you disable VSync and you lower volumetric fog, that gives you massive performance gains, and it in fact does. I'm now able to run the game between 70 and 80 FPS at all times, which is great to see. I am convinced that with some additional patching and tweaking from the developers, and with some driver support from Nvidia and AMD, these issues should be mostly resolved upon release, and we should expect, if you're running hardware similar to mine, to get 60 FPS at 1080p, which is all I can really ask for. So while there are problems now, I am confident they will be resolved before the release of the game. Another area of complaint that I have that may not be applicable to everyone is that the realistic theme and the franchise here does not gel particularly well with the gameplay. Tom Clancy games tend to be known for their tactics. We've got Splinter Cell. Splinter Cell is a very tactical stealth game. We have Rainbow Six, which is a tactical shooter. We have Ghost Recon, which is the third-person tactical shooter. And then we have The Division, which is a loot game. It's an ARPG. It's like Destiny. It's like Diablo. It's like Borderlands. Now, there's nothing wrong with that type of game mechanically, but there is something a little wrong with shooting a guy in the head who has a hoodie on and a baseball bat 60 times in order for him to die. Now, if he was a space alien or a marine with tons of armor, that would make thematic sense, and it wouldn't have such a disconnect as it does in this game. For me personally, that's a gripe. It may not bother you. The gameplay itself, there's nothing wrong with necessarily. It's just I don't feel they particularly gel with one another. You have a very realistic depiction of Manhattan, one-to-one. You have these great, surreal environments full of, like, contamination. It looks amazing. You have a franchise which is known for being tactical. And then we have guys in hoodies that take 60 bullets to kill, and they drop loot. It's kind of weird to me. Also, the fact that you can PvP with other agents is also kind of weird to me thematically. But again, these are just thematic issues. Now, one thematic issue that ties into gameplay somewhat is the fact that in Diablo, for example, if you get a cool, awesome flaming sword, that's awesome thematically and mechanically. In The Division, you get an MP5 that's blue instead of green and has slightly higher damage numbers, and it certainly doesn't feel anywhere near as exciting to obtain. So I am concerned about the longevity of the loot game here, because really at the end of the day, it's a numbers game, and it doesn't have much thematic weight to keep you interested long term. So that's a complaint that maybe won't be applicable to everyone, but it certainly is to me. Something else I want to talk about is the user interface in this game. It's incredibly cluttered and it's constantly in your face. Some of it's handled well, some of it not so well. The map being a primary example. If I want to see where I am in the world in relation to other things, I hit the M key. It brings up this entire screen map where I can't see my character anymore. And if I'm in a PvP zone, that's a dangerous thing to do. So I'm not entirely fond of the way they've chosen to do this. I saw in some original videos that the map actually appeared on the ground in front of you, and you could see the map whilst also seeing the world and still remain aware of your situation. Not the case now, and I have a problem with that, and it kind of gets in the way. Overall, the user interface is very heavy. I understand they have a lot to convey to the player. It's kind of an MMO style game, but the way it's done isn't particularly nuanced, and I would prefer that it was less cluttered. You can edit some of the UI in the menu. You can move things around and change the transparency and scaling of certain things, but I think it still needs some work. The next thing to talk about is PvP, the Dark Zone, and balance. Now, if you don't know, the way the Dark Zone works in this game, and I wouldn't forgive you for not understanding it, by the way, because the marketing material behind this stuff wasn't particularly well handled. What the Dark Zone is it's essentially a part of the city that's cordoned off. It's been contaminated. No one goes in, no one goes out. That's kind of the idea here. Now, you're a Division agent, so you get to go in. You go in, you kill guys, you get loot. That loot's contaminated, and you can't just take it straight outside. You have to take it to an evacuation point. A helicopter comes in, you put your loot on the helicopter, it flies away, and then it goes into your stash in the normal game, the non-PvP section of the game. The PvP comes in, though, in the fact that you can kill other agents for their loot. And so there's a risk-reward thing there. You go around the Dark Zone, you find cool items, you get to the evac zone, and then someone comes in and tries to kill you and take it from you, and it encourages PvP. My two major concerns regarding this system right now are, if someone comes into the PvP zone later than everyone else, which will happen, you know, there will be those guys who rush to max level, get the best gear in the game immediately, and then people who take their time. The guys who rush to max level are going to have an inherent advantage over the people who are just coming into the Dark Zone for the first time. That's a major concern for me because this game is not a skill game. This game is a gear game. If you have better guns, you're going to kill me. Your time to kill is going to be much higher than mine, and I'm going to lose. This could be very discouraging for new players entering the Dark Zone for the first time. Now, if this was just a dedicated PvP zone, that could be excusable. Problem is, it's not. If you want to get the best loot in this game, you have to participate in the Dark Zone. That's where the best gear comes from. So, in order to get the best gear, you have to engage in PvP, and if you're underleveled and you don't have the gear that the other team has, then you're going to die. So I can see some frustration points there. Another concern I have right now is the incentives to actually engage in PvP are quite low. You get a very small credit reward for doing so, and you have the potential to steal some good loot from someone. But it's kind of easier just to team up with people and go kill the AI for that loot, so there's not a huge incentive right now. Also, you have a timer on your head. You become a rogue agent. You get a timer on your head, and everyone in the game can see where you are exactly at all times during that period. Every time you shoot at someone, that timer goes up. So in order to defend yourself, you have to shoot at people, but then your timer goes up, so eventually you're going to get killed. Survivability right now for a rogue agent is incredibly low, and it discourages PvP entirely, to the point where I've entered the Dark Zone and spent several hours in there at times without anyone engaging in PvP. There's some core balancing issues here, and I think it needs to be addressed before release. Obviously, they have a bit of leeway considering this is supposed to be endgame content, but still, there are balance problems here. They need to be addressed. I hope they are listening to the community on this one. Another complaint I have is that the game involves a lot of walking. It's a one-to-one representation of New York, or Manhattan in this case, and as a result, there's a lot of walking involved. Now, when you're walking from location A to location B, say you have a mission, and you have to get to it, it can take a long time. It can take 2 to 3 minutes because of the scale of this city. Now, that's not inherently a problem. What's a problem here is that there's not much to do along the way. Occasionally, you'll stumble into a couple of enemies looting a corpse. You'll shoot them. That's fine. Then maybe you'll see a couple of other enemies surrounding a car or something, or harassing someone, and you'll shoot them. Not particularly engaging after a while, and you see the same scenarios again and again. There's nothing here dynamically that keeps a player interested and not knowing what's going to come around the next corner. Now I know. Now I hit the X key, which is auto run, and I just run along the street, and if I see some bad guys, I go, oh, okay, and then I shoot them and I move on. There's nothing particularly exciting or compelling that can happen in between point A and point B, and that can make downtime kind of boring, and there's a lot of downtime in this game between missions. I hope on release they increase the spawn rate of some of these enemies, and maybe there's some more dynamic stuff in the later areas of the game, I don't know, but right now, enemy variety plus dynamic event variety is very, very low. And as a result, you can get quite bored during the downtime. And trust me, in a one-to-one representation of a city, there's a lot of downtime. The final issue I want to address here is the issue of hacking, and probably one of the biggest issues with The Division so far. a lot of people have been reporting hackers in their games, mostly invisible players and guys that can move at incredible speed. Now, there was a post yesterday over on Reddit by a guy who claims to be a developer with experience in game security. He claims that the game is incredibly easy to hack, and the reason for this is because most of the game's important data is handled by the client and not the server. Now, for those of you who don't know how this works, basically, if a client is entrusted with certain information such as XP or ammo count or the speed of the player, all of that stuff can be interfered with, exploited, and then sent to the server, and then the server reports that to everybody else. So, for example, I can tell the server that I now have 1 million gold, and the server will update the database to illustrate that I have 1 million gold. This is a problem, and this is, in most cases, why many multiplayer games deal with this kind of data on the server rather than on the client side. Another alternative to this problem is to encrypt the data so that no one can search for it, well, at least not easily in RAM. But what seems to be the case here, and the guy has now, since then, posted a ton of video evidence basically showing that he can just increase his level to 255 in the dark zone and then decrease it back down to level 2, or give himself extra currency, or make himself run at incredible speeds and be invisible. He can do this when he wants. He illustrates in one video being able to shoot, running out of ammo, and then triggering his little hack, and then bam, now he doesn't run out of ammo anymore. Now, Ubisoft have come out and they've said, oh, this is just a small bug, it's a glitch, don't worry, we've been working on it, it's not an issue. To me, it looks like a pretty big issue, quite frankly, and this guy has provided enough evidence for me, someone with some programming experience and industry experience as well, to make me think at least that this is very, very much a client-side hack. Now, this is speculation, but if this is the case, if this game is very easily exploitable on the client side, then hacking tools will be made available incredibly quickly to the general public, and as such, it could ruin the game. Now, the only way I know of to resolve this, as I've said, is to move all of this stuff server-side or to encrypt that data. Both of these processes take significant amounts of time to implement and require fundamental changes to the netcode and parts of the engine. Without being privy to the engine itself and Ubisoft's infrastructure, it's hard for me to speculate much further than that, but I do know it takes time. And having worked in the industry myself, I know it takes a long time to get things done. It also takes a long time to get these kinds of things through QA. This is a fundamental infrastructure change. To get that through QA is going to have to go back and look at everything to do with ammo, everything to do with XP, everything to do with PvP. They're going to have to fully analyze all of those systems to make sure they work before the patch goes live. Problem is, the game comes out in less than a month, and I don't think, based on my experience, that this is going to happen in that time frame. So this may be something that has to come in a patch later down the road. Now, Ubisoft may have known about these issues, but I find that highly unlikely given the fact that they're only just coming to light. Also, any engineer that expected these to be a problem in the first place, these kinds of client-side exploits, wouldn't have implemented such a system to begin with, and it wouldn't be exploitable now. This is the kind of thing you do early on in development when you're making the engine to begin with, and not something you do at the end. So, I think it's kind of a big deal, honestly. Now, we will have to wait and see what happens with Ubisoft and what happens on release, but I would cautiously advise you right now to hold off on pre-ordering this game and buying this game before release, and wait for reviews and wait for the initial reports from players regarding PvP and this hacking problem, because if this isn't resolved by the time this game releases, the game could literally be dead on arrival. I don't know many people who want to engage in a game that's rampant with hackers in a game about loot and PvP and co-op. So it's a big deal. Hopefully this issue gets addressed. I would really love to see a proper official response from Ubisoft explaining in detail each of these bugs, as they're calling them, because to me it looks like straight up client-side hacking. If you found this video helpful or useful in some way, please let me know in the comments below. If you disagree with something I said, please let me know also. And if you want to support the channel, please like, favorite, share and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.